Welcome to the Altered Call podcast. Today we address the third type of belief, a pursuit. Jesus tells us to follow him, to pursue him, but how do we do that? My name is Pillischafske. I believe that comfort betrays us. I believe that playing cards make for perfect bookmarks, and I believe that you are uniquely created to reflect God's glory in the world. Beliefs have a cost tied to them. In previous episodes, we've discussed how a standard requires us to deny ourselves access to something that we might otherwise enjoy, and how a lens shifts the way that we interpret the chaos that surrounds us. A pursuit is a belief that is ultimately defined in its execution, but in the meantime, it is judged by the steady stream of sacrifice that is required to sustain it. I prefer to view Christianity as a pursuit. We are chasing after God and gradually being refined by His influence in our lives. In calling us to follow Him, Jesus explained that we would be required to sacrifice our life in that pursuit. Obviously, this seems extreme until we realize that He wasn't asking us to die, but instead to live a superior life. We are called to give up our preferences and expectations for our lives in pursuit of true meaning and purpose. We aren't replacing them with something lesser. We are instead admitting that we were wrong the entire time, that Jesus' way is superior to anything that we were capable of finding on our own, and that our lives of self-indulgence and self-sufficiency were at best a comfortable illusion that distracted us from the truth. The reason that Christian pursuit gets such a bad reputation is because there's a temptation to approach it backwards. It is commonly viewed that we are called to give up our preferences for a series of rules regarding our future conduct. But I think that this misses the point. Jesus directly attacked this idea in his ministry. His harshest words and most controversial behaviors were reserved for the people pushing these types of rules. Instead, he would often subvert the rule in favor of the guiding principle on which the rule was founded. Yet we assume that giving our life will be torturous conformity when the reality is that living in truth is joyful liberation. When you pursue Jesus, He isn't calling you to a list of rules or to look just like every other Christian, but a gradual realization that He is right and that everything you have known before is a lie. By voluntarily submitting to His wisdom, to the infinite truths of God that govern reality, we are able to become our truest selves. Instead of conforming to a list of rules, we are gifted specific truths and given the opportunity to embrace them. Will this result in many believers coming to the same conclusions? Yes, but rules aren't the cause, they are the effect. We are simply all responding to the same overwhelming call of the God that created everything. I want to explore this idea through analogy because I think that this will clear up some of the ideas that can get confused regarding cause and effect. Let's say that as a young man, you believe that you have what it takes to become the greatest fighter in the world. You know that you aren't there yet, but you believe that with proper commitment, you could realize this dream. As such, you begin your pursuit. Now, regarding Christianity, we assume that a pursuit represents a relatively fixed course of action. If we want to be more like God, we need to do these specific things. But I want you to think about all the flexibility that our young fighter has in choosing his path. His first step would be to select an initial discipline and start his training. But which one? There are hundreds of fighting styles, and while it is true that some are more useful than others, there is nothing saying that he must pick any of those at the outset. Now, certain disciplines or combinations might get him to his goal more quickly or with a higher degree of success. But there is no one path to the top of the mountain. He has immense freedom of choice, even within this initial step. From there, he gets to choose his pace. If he simply sits on the couch and does nothing for an extended period of time, no one will believe that he is pursuing the goal. But he has the freedom to decide how often and at what intensity he will train. Does he need a coach? Eventually this will be required, but in the beginning he might do fine without one, or by taking what he can get from more experienced fighters. Should he start fighting in local events and gain real fight experience? Or continue practicing until he thinks he can land something bigger and reduce his chances of injury along the way? Having dedicated several years to his craft, should he now switch disciplines to broaden his skill set, or become a specialist in his preferred combat style? Should he sign the first contract that he is offered, or stay in the gym until he thinks that he has the best chance of reaching the peak? It turns out that while many of the top fighters in the world end up looking very much alike once they reach their final destination, the ways that they matured and developed to get there are often vastly different. It turns out that there is no right way to become a top-level fighter. It does take a combination of skill, experience, work ethic, training, and coaching, but it isn't acquired by formula. No one agrees on the right mix. The same can be said for our faith journey. Will two Christians that have been aggressively pursuing God for years have a lot in common? Yes, but their paths to get there will be entirely unique. Instead of signing up for a list of rules and expectations, we are signing up for a gradual revealing of truth. We embrace the truths that speak most strongly to us as individuals and decide at a personal level what to do with those truths. It turns out that over time that pursuit will start to take a familiar shape. This doesn't mean that we will conform our way into copies of each other, but that we will have a handful of similar expressions and common characteristics. If there are, for example, 20 common traits of Christians, you won't necessarily have all of them, but maybe a handful that you have uniquely acquired via faithful pursuit. These expressions or characteristics aren't representative of abiding by a set rule, but as a result of submission to the same unifying force. Many Christians don't drink alcohol. Does this make it a rule? No. It's just that many people in pursuing God have determined that alcohol is a dangerous substance in regards to that pursuit. Using the same or similar logic, they have each determined at a personal level that the risk outweighs the reward and have set a strong standard accordingly. So while they ended up making the same decision, it was not something imposed on them from the outside. It was self-imposed to aid in a similar pursuit. Now, I said earlier that a pursuit was judged both by the sacrifices made along the way, in the case of our young fighter, time, attention, and youth, but also by the end result. While the sacrifices made along the way are dramatically different for the young man who stayed on his couch and the young man that tried and failed, both ended up in the same place. Neither was the greatest fighter. In looking back on the pursuit of each man, the result was failure. This result may lead to regret on both sides, but in different ways. In one case, for not trying at all, and in the other for sacrificing too much towards a misplaced belief. This is the most unique and interesting thing about the Christian pursuit. God guarantees that you will be successful. Every believer courageous enough to walk down this path of pursuit will achieve victory, not by their own strength or dedication, but because Jesus has already agreed to cover the difference. Our standard, our ultimate goal, is perfection. In order to be like God, we are required to be perfect, but we are not capable of it. A proper understanding of this problem should be enough to discourage anyone from even attempting to be like God. Knowing its undeniable futility, we should just stay on the couch and avoid a string of sacrifices that will ultimately fail us. But God decided that He wants us to do it anyway. The question is why? Why does He want us to try if He knows that we will fail? Actually stop and think about this. Why would God encourage any of this when He already knows the result? Because the fighter that tried and failed, and the young boy that stayed on the couch didn't achieve the same result. The fighter that tried was able to experience real combat, to test their skill and to know more intimately what it takes to climb the mountain. The result may have been failure, but they were able to experience fighting to a much greater extent than the boy that never tried. That is the point. If we sit on our hands, if we admit rightly that perfection is beyond us and we give up on trying, it is a bad thing for us. By never trying, by never testing perfection to know how mind-numbingly impossible it is, we never gain a true appreciation of the God that made us. We never get to experience the incredible sacrifices that he made in subjecting himself to our world, or gain the opportunity to more rightly judge the mountain that we could never possibly climb. It turns out that giving up, instead of trying and failing in our pursuit of God, is bad for us. God is infinite. He is perfect. He doesn't need to be worshipped by us. He doesn't need our sacrifices. Instead, we are the ones that benefit from worshiping Him. We are the ones that benefit from sacrificing to Him. God, in His infinite mercy, has designed a system that benefits us entirely. He has given us a free pass to try and to fail, knowing that even the best of us will fall miserably short, but knowing that the journey will benefit us enough to justify the cost. The tragic and terrible cost that He sent His only Son to pay. Yet many of us decide to stay on the couch, maybe in acknowledgement that we will never be enough, or from fear of arbitrary rules with which we don't yet agree. We have decided that it isn't worth the risk. There is only one problem with that stance. There is no risk. God has assumed it all. He has offered insurance in the event of failure, knowing full well that failure will happen, because He wants to remove any excuses that we might have. He knows that trying and failing in our pursuit of Him will result in knowing Him better, in appreciating Him more, and He wants more than anything for us to try. As relates mankind, this may be the only thing that He wants. Not for His sake, but always and forever for our own. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Altered Call Podcast. Before you go, I want to make you aware of our new YouTube page. There I will post a weekly update where I discuss the most recent episode of the podcast in more detail and tease information that is coming in future episodes. Feel free to like and subscribe here, there, and everywhere if you are finding value exploring these ideas. You can reach me by email using alex@alteredcall.com, or you can visit the website for additional information.